When Old World released, I reviewed the game in a very objective light, and I have to say, a relatively positive light, actually. I'd probably rank it around an 8 out of 10 if I had to assign a number to it, but what you need to know is Old World's a solid game. Following that, I released this video, which was much less positively received by the community, which I should expect, of course, because I was quite critical of the game. It was more of a subjective piece. I talked about things like the fact that regardless of whether Epic Games, funded this game or not, I'd prefer to see it available in an open market and not restricted to a certain platform. I talked about some other gripes and frustrations. I'd like to see the game really lean into its dynamic families a bit more, and when the events pop up, I'd like them to be a little bit more engaging. And a few other small things around, I'd like to see more graphics options, a more modern style texture pack would be great, alongside this graphical option as well, though. I'm absolutely not saying that these quote-unquote 90s graphics, that's a joke by the way, are necessarily a bad thing, because I don't think they are, and I totally understand it fits the aesthetic. Anyway, in this video, I'd like to reflect on some of the good feedback that you provided. Comments like this. And when I say good feedback, by the way, I don't necessarily mean people who just flat out agreed with me, although that's welcome. I mean, people who really listened and reflected and gave me things to think about in the same way that I hope to give you things to think about. So thank you to everybody who engaged. I will, however, add that comments like this, where we go down a bit of a rabbit hole and start attacking people based on weird assumptions like where they're born, and somehow that has things to do with the game, or the developer stole your gal. That's a funny one. Regardless of that feedback, I would like to thank the vast majority of people who really engaged with that video on a really meaningful level. Thank you for that. Now I'd like to reflect on the good, because I think, I've provided this neutral review of the game. I've then gone on to reflect on some of my frustrations in playing through it and purchasing it and getting it to work and having it be well optimized. But I think it's also important that I now provide the good, just as I did with Humankind. I did Humankind the bad and Humankind the good. And of course, in fairness to Old World, it's now time for me to reflect on the things that I'm really enjoying about Old World. And I'm gonna involve some of your feedback that I read from the comments on previous videos as well, because I think, we're always learning. Let's learn together, and let's now reflect in my final Old World video. This is 3 of 3, Old World the Good. I have to say, for starters, I really, really admire the fact that Old World has blended Crusader Kings and Sid Meier's Civilization in a way that does have some flaws, but is actually quite good. There's a reason why I titled my Old World review video a blend between Crusader Kings and Civ, because that's what it does. The most noticeable advancement for that, I think, is the importance on people. Okay, so each game turn is 1 year of your empire's leader's life. Okay, you age just like you would in Crusader Kings. Your character develops. You develop a family, a dynasty. You develop interesting traits, sometimes fantastic, sometimes deeply flawed. From, Alexander the Great to Alexander the Insane, to the noble, and everywhere in between. You have heirs, and you can change your succession laws. And of course, as the title of the game suggests, Old World, it sticks within that Old World timing, that antiquity period of humankind. Not humankind, the game, but humankind, us, as a people. I think that's really important for Old World, and I think it synergizes really well with the dynamic family building, right? The game's timing, whether you necessarily enjoy the antiquity period of history, is a separate thing entirely from this, by the way. The game's timing and the way that it draws together both dynamic families and having that whole one turn per year, 200 turn games, it really allows Old World to focus in on this niche and do this niche well. And I think it does it very well indeed. Is it quite as good as Crusader Kings at simulating family dynamics and politics and intrigue? Of course it isn't. Is it quite as good as Civilization at building a turn-based 4X strategy title, well, that one's up for debate. But what it is doing is merging the two together, so it fills its own unique niche, and it does it well. I think overall it contributes to a sense for the player that you're really shaping your own civilization, your own empire, should I say, to avoid confusion. And in ways that go beyond, I think, just messing with numbers and statistics, right? Slavery, for example, exists both in Old World and Civ. But how it impacts those games is very, very different. Even if you go back through the ages of Civ, you look at something like Civ 4, which let you sacrifice some of your population to rush a project. We also see this in Humankind, where you can contribute people for progress. In Old World, however, it becomes a topic that is, I think, controversially, a little bit more up for debate, right? You might find your people, for example, come to their senses and they want to get rid of it, and they encourage you to get rid of slavery. You might find the opposite, right? There's a much less of a soulless kind of UI, really anti-human sort of feeling to it, and a much more sort of flavorful, dynamic engagement with it. And that's just one example of how Old World makes you feel like you're a part of the game. You really can get involved in it, because unlike in Civ, where for all of its strength, you start very early in the piece, thousands of years BCE, and you end the game landing a colony on Mars, which definitely has its strengths, and obviously I enjoy that. But the fact that Old World is so honed in and focused does it a really great service. Couple that with trade and intrigue, with ambassadors, spy masters, and you've got yourself a really quite enjoyable system. The second really key takeaway is the orders system. So in Old World, if you missed my review, orders are a couple troop movements, troop attacks, but also other orders that you might make as a leader of a civilization. Ordering your ambassador, for example, to conduct a trade mission, or ordering or commanding your spy master. All of these movements and actions use up your orders per turn, and your orders, therefore, provide a really great deal of flexibility. You can fang all of your orders into movement and move far and wide and attack, but at a trade-off of not being able to conduct perhaps vital diplomatic missions or vital trade missions, and so your economy might suffer as a result, or your diplomacy might suffer as a result. That is really, really the other key strength to Old World, and the way that it ties in with what I've already mentioned in developing a family and developing a dynasty. It comes together to create a really enjoyable experience. There are, of course, some downsides to the game, and if you're just watching this video and no others, I would recommend that you at least go away and do some of your own research. Perhaps even just reading through the comments section might be helpful, or you can go and look at my full review of the game, and then my sister video to this, my Old World frustrations. There are limitations to the game. You may not enjoy its victory, understated victory conditions, for example. You may not enjoy the platform that it's released on. For example, you may not enjoy the way it looks. However, I think this is a good game, and I want to make that really clear up front. Old World is a good game. In fact, it's a great 4X strategy game that can actually really come close at the moment, I think, to competing with Civilization. In the long run, will it replace Civ for me? No. Will it stand alone as a strong title? I think so. I think, in particular, gamers who really enjoy the era of Civilization 4 and Crusader Kings will feel right at home with Old World. Thank you very much for watching. This concludes my 3-part series of reviews and reflections of Old World. If you enjoyed them, I would appreciate a like rating, or even a comment. Do engage with me. I love the comment section, and I use the comment section often to help inspire me and teach me new points of view and perspectives. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.